What if one of the most comforting foods in the world is also one of the most misunderstood? Most people hear the word cocoa and immediately think of chocolate bars, desserts, sugar, cravings, and indulgence. But real cocoa, especially unsweetened cocoa, is a very different story. Behind the flavor and the cultural obsession, cocoa contains a remarkable set of plant compounds that researchers have been studying for years, especially for heart health, blood flow, and antioxidant protection. At the same time, cocoa is not magic, and the way it's consumed makes all the difference. Harvard's nutrition source notes that cocoa is rich in flavanols, plant compounds that may help support blood vessel function, while also reminding us that chocolate products often come with added sugar and calories that change the health picture dramatically. Today on the Vital Nourish, we're going to talk about cocoa in a way that is actually useful. We'll look at what cocoa really is, what it contains, what science suggests it may do for your body, where people get misled, and who should be a little more cautious. And if you stay until the end, I'll also explain why cocoa can be a smart part of a wellness routine without becoming another overhyped superfood story. If you enjoy practical, evidence-based videos on natural health, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's start with the basics. Cocoa comes from the seeds of the cacao tree, theobromine cacao. Those seeds are fermented, dried, roasted, and processed into different products, including cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and eventually many forms of chocolate. Unsweetened cocoa powder is not the same thing as a candy bar, and that distinction matters a lot. USDA Food Data Central is the primary U.S. food database for nutrient information, and it shows that unsweetened cocoa powder is a concentrated food that provides protein, fat, fiber, minerals, and several bioactive compounds, even though the exact nutrient values can vary by product and processing. What makes cocoa especially interesting is not just its basic nutrition, but its flavanols. These are a group of polyphenols, especially compounds like epicatechin and catechin, that appear to influence the way blood vessels function. Harvard explains that cocoa flavanols may help stimulate nitric oxide production in the endothelium, the inner lining of blood vessels. Nitric oxide helps blood vessels relax, improves blood flow, and may contribute to modest reductions in blood pressure. This is one reason cocoa has received so much attention in cardiovascular research. For years, short-term studies have suggested that cocoa flavanols may improve vascular function, support healthier blood pressure patterns, and reduce some cardiovascular risk markers. A large NIH-supported trial called Cosmos looked at cocoa flavanol supplementation in older adults. The trial did not significantly reduce the overall primary cardiovascular outcome, but it did find a reduction in cardiovascular death in some analyses, which is one reason cocoa flavanols are still considered promising, even though the overall evidence is mixed rather than conclusive. Harvard also summarized this by saying, cocoa supplements did not reduce heart attacks overall in that major trial, but they were linked with lower heart disease-related deaths. That's the right mindset for cocoa. Promising, but not magical. In real-life nutrition, cocoa seems most useful when you think of it as part of a broader pattern. It may support heart health not because it performs miracles, but because its flavanols appear to help the blood vessels function more efficiently and may reduce oxidative stress. Earlier reviews and meta-analyses have also linked cocoa flavanol intake with modest blood pressure improvement and better endothelial function, which helps explain why the cardiovascular conversation around cocoa keeps coming back. And that brings us to antioxidants. Cocoa is often described as an antioxidant-rich food, and that's generally fair. Its flavanols and related polyphenols can help reduce oxidative stress in cells. Oxidative stress is part of normal aging, but it is also involved in chronic inflammation and many disease processes. That does not mean cocoa prevents aging or disease on its own, but it does mean that a minimally processed cocoa product can be one source of useful protective compounds in the diet. Harvard notes that cocoa powder contains flavonoids associated with antioxidant activity and possible benefits for chronic disease risk, mood, and cognition. Now let's talk about the brain and mood side, because this is where cocoa gets really interesting to a lot of people. Cocoa contains not only flavanols but also methylxanthines, especially theobromine, and small amounts of caffeine. These compounds can affect alertness and mood. Theobromine is milder than caffeine, but it is still stimulating. Cleveland Clinic notes that theobromine from cacao can increase heart rate and may contribute to palpitations in sensitive individuals. That means cocoa may feel pleasantly uplifting for some people, while others may notice jitteriness, a racing heart, or sleep disruption if they consume too much or use it too late in the day. This is why cocoa often has that unique reputation as both comforting and energizing. It's not just psychological, the chemistry does matter. But again, dose and form matter more than people realize. A spoonful of unsweetened cocoa powder in a smoothie or warm drink is very different from a large milk chocolate bar loaded with sugar and fat. Harvard emphasizes this distinction clearly. Cocoa itself contains beneficial flavonoids, but the chocolate products people actually eat can be high in calories, sugar, and saturated fat, which may cancel out some of the benefits if consumed carelessly. And this is probably the biggest mistake people make with cocoa. They hear dark chocolate is healthy and assume more is better. But chocolate is still a processed food matrix. Some forms are much closer to candy than to a functional food. If your goal is to get more of cocoa's beneficial compounds, unsweetened cocoa powder, or a very dark chocolate with a high cocoa solids content usually makes more sense than conventional chocolate bars. Harvard notes that dark chocolate typically contains more cocoa solids and more flavanols than milk chocolate. Another point that often gets overlooked is that processing changes cocoa. The more cocoa is processed, alkalized, diluted with sugar, or blended with milk solids and fats, the more its health profile may shift. So when people ask, is cocoa healthy? The real answer is, which cocoa, in what amount, and in what form? From a nutrition perspective, unsweetened cocoa powder can contribute minerals too. USDA's food data resources show that cocoa products can provide meaningful amounts of minerals such as iron and magnesium, though exact values depend on the product. That's another reason cocoa can be nutritionally interesting beyond the flavanols alone. But now we need to be honest about the downside. Cocoa is not ideal for everyone. Because it contains caffeine and theobromine, it may not be a good fit for people with tachycardia, palpitations, stimulant sensitivity, or certain sleep problems. It may also interact indirectly with the way some people respond to medications or other stimulants, especially if they are already consuming a lot of caffeine from coffee, tea, energy drinks, or medication-containing products. Cleveland Clinic specifically flags theobromine in chocolate as something that can increase heart rate and trigger palpitations in susceptible people. There's also the issue of calories and portions. Cocoa powder itself is not a sugary dessert, but the moment it becomes chocolate confections, sweet drinks, or healthy treats packed with syrups and oils, the health story changes fast. This is why moderation still matters, even with foods that contain beneficial compounds. So where does cocoa fit into a healthy lifestyle? Probably best as a small, intentional food, not as a justification for overeating sweets. Unsweetened cocoa powder can be added to Greek yogurt, smoothies, oatmeal, or a warm drink without turning it into a sugar bomb. A small portion of dark chocolate can also make sense for some people, especially if it replaces less nutritious desserts rather than adding extra calories on top of an already excessive diet. And that's really the spirit of this whole conversation. Cocoa can be beneficial. It may support vascular health, provide antioxidant compounds, and offer a mild mood-lifting effect. But it works best when you respect the difference between real cocoa and ultra-processed chocolate products. The health potential is in the cocoa itself, not in the marketing. So if you love chocolate, the good news is that you do not necessarily need to fear cocoa. You just need to use it wisely. If this video helped you see cocoa differently, leave a like, subscribe to the Vital Nourish, and let me know in the comments how you prefer to use cocoa: dark chocolate, pure cocoa powder, or maybe a healthier homemade drink. And as promised, here's the disclaimer. The information in this video is for general educational purposes only and does not replace medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have a medical condition, are pregnant, are sensitive to caffeine or stimulants, or take prescription medications, talk to your doctor or a qualified healthcare professional before making significant dietary changes or using cocoa therapeutically. See you in the next video.